another Modified Rides podcast. Today I have what's probably the one of the top custom truck or custom vehicle builders in the country. Today I have Jeremy from Trey 5. What's up, man?
Much, how are you?
So you focus mostly on trucks, or do you do cars and everything? Because you kind of become known for your trucks.
Yeah, I think the trucks is our bread and butter, especially the C10s or really anything like 47 to 97. I couldn't tell you how many we've done, but I would love to do some more cars and I'd love to do some other stuff, but definitely I would say we're known for the C10 trucks or even a couple years.
Well, I've had a couple other people from your area. I've had Jason from Fat Fender, Scott from Rev B, and I'd say the Phoenix area has become the truck capital of the country now. Like if Phoenix, I always say if Phoenix was wiped off the map, we'd have no more cool trucks coming out probably.
Yeah, I mean the good thing for me and where we're located is if you consider like the Porterbilts and even like the High Tests and those guys, they're over an hour away from me. So I'm completely west side of town. We're pretty much the only ones on the west side of town. I feel like everybody, the AZ Pro Performance, Scott at Rev B is kind of in the middle, but everybody else is an hour away from here easy. I think if I got to go out to AZ Pro to pick up stuff, I'm probably like an hour and 20 minutes. So,
but it seems the whole truck community, what I guess when we were kids was all California and it kind of went Texas. I almost feel it's shifted to Phoenix now.
There's some good stuff here for sure. It's hotter than hell in the summer, but other than that, like right now, it's October 24th, and I'm still in shorts and t-shirt and no hoodie like yourself, and sitting on the patio, and we'll be sitting on the patio for dinners from now until May. So
I know when I had Brian Good on, he's talking about like we get seasonal depression here in the winter, where you guys seem to have seasonal depression in the summers. Like because I don't want to go outside after daylight or go back before the sun goes down.
Yeah, the only difference for you guys is, and you're not bad if you're Nashville, but the guys that say that I was born in Minnesota, so same thing in Minnesota. Seasonal depression here isn't as bad because we go to the pool or we go to the lake or we still get outside. Whereas if it snows, unless you're skiing on the hill, you're not doing anything outside.
Yeah. So I guess tell the listeners, who is Jeremy? Like who are you, and like what do you own? For those that don't know.
I'm Jeremy. We're in Peoria, Arizona, and I own Trey 5 Customs. We have been in this shop in some format for a little over 10 years now. I started next door in a single suite, got an opportunity to move over into the double suite, and then about 6 months after we moved into the double suite, we took our old single suite back when the people that moved in there couldn't hack it, I guess, for lack of a better term. But we got the opportunity to take over our last spot, so now we're in all 3 spots. The beautiful relationship that we have here is with Frank next door at Eye Candy. So about 4 months after I moved into this shop, him and I were talking, and he asked me to reach out to the property manager here to see if there was anything available. He was working for somebody else at the time, and the building that's right behind that wall is now Frank's shop. So now we have 5 suites all connected. There's no door between his and ours, but we literally walk out the back door and into his back door. So
yeah. How long have you been in business?
I've been, legitimately as a business, I've been in here since day one. So like when I formed the actual corporation and all that stuff was just over 10 years ago. Before that, I was working out of my 3-car garage with an RV gate on either side of the house, and I would build trucks on the RV gate side of the house, and I would build trucks in the garage and cars in the garage. And back then, it was a lot of hydraulics installs on cars. But I did that for, I think, 6 years as like a full-time gig. So that was my job, even though it wasn't, it was cash and under the table. And I still paid taxes and all that type of stuff. I wouldn't call it a real company back then, but that's kind of when the name started popping up, was probably 16 years ago, like maybe even longer than that, Street Source days and forum days and all that stuff. I think that's when a lot of people, and I still get people that comment on YouTube videos or Instagram or stuff, social media type things that say, man, I remember you from back in the Street Source days and back in the mini trucking days. So, I've been around for a while, but the shop itself has been here for just over 10 years. Hector has been he was my first employee and he's still here. So he's been here. I think he'll be 10 years in December. So him and I have kind of been running it for 10 years now.
How many employees you have?
There's 5 employees right now, plus I have a bookkeeper that helps me out once a week. Try to keep the billing straight. That's what's here. I mean, we kind of like to think of it as a big team, with Eye Candy next door, and he's got his guys. So he ends up, Frank will end up coming over here and kind of micromanaging my guys sometimes, and then I'm guilty of going over to Frank and micromanaging his guys sometimes. So it's almost sometimes it feels like we're all one big company, and I think a lot of people think of us like that. But here in my shop, that's what we have. So
Where did the name Tray 5 come from?
secret. I knew you were going to ask that. Everybody asks that. Everybody asks that. Nobody's got the answer. My wife doesn't even know. So it's one of those things where I used to joke and say, yeah, as soon as a customer pays me $1 million in builds, then I'll tell them. But now it's kind of like, well, can't do that anymore because these things have gotten so expensive. It's an old inside joke. Started off as nothing to do with cars or trucks. It was just kind of a nickname thing. And I won't disclose where it came from or where it went or anything like that because I think it's fun. I didn't want to be like Jeremy's Customs, when I started all this stuff. I didn't want it to be like tied to me because one of my biggest pet peeves is that self-made thing. I hate that. I feel like you're nothing without everybody around you. So I didn't want it to be just a representation of me. I wanted it to be whatever this turned into. I wanted everybody that works here to have pride in it and not just be like, oh, I'm just working for Jeremy at Jeremy's Customs or Jeremy's Rides or whatever. So that was always a big thing for me. And that name, Tray 5, had kind of followed me around a little bit before all this. So I just thought it'd be funny to bring it in and never really thought it would turn into what it is. But now it's kind of like this mysterious name and I like it. So
now it's a brand in its own.
Yeah. And we get all of it. I mean, we get Tire 5 and Trace and people will call and say, hey, Trey, is this Trey? And it's like, no, nobody's here name is Trey. And, oh, what's Trey stand for? Nothing really. I can't. What do you mean? Doesn't stand? Was it like for 35s? No. The 35 little logo just came about because it kind of does not represent, but like it kind of does simulate it a little bit. Just to simplify a logo, we came up with that 35 one a little while back.
So where did you get involved with custom vehicles?
I would say it started from the magazines. My parents are split up. When they split up, I was in 4th grade, and my mom had packed us up, and we moved from North Carolina to.
Where'd you live out here?
Charlotte.
Okay.
So, born in Minnesota, made a stop, and then ended up in Charlotte for like 4 years. My dad still lives in Charlotte, so my mom packed us up and moved out to Arizona, and we were still young. I got 2 younger sisters, so we would fly back and hang out with my dad in the summertime, and sometimes he'd be able to take time off work, and sometimes he wouldn't. But we would always go to like the grocery store when we first got there and go shopping for whatever we wanted for meals, basically, when we were with him. And I would pick up a mini truck and magazine or both. This is before Sport Truck was even around.
Yeah.
And I would just read those magazines. And the one I always go back to is, I think it was a Stillen, like S10 Blazer with the ground effects on it. It was like a maroon or burgundy type color. But
I remember that one.
Yeah, it's just that's kind of where it came from for me was just reading magazines when I was, in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And, until I kind of became old enough that it was up to me to get back to see my dad and not up to my parents anymore, So
when did you start working on vehicles?
16. I went to high school with a juice, which we did. So an old buddy of mine had a shop in his garage, and we built an Isuzu mini truck in his garage with hydraulics. This was back when hydraulics still had coil springs and accumulators were like a thing of the future.
Yeah.
But I actually had accumulators on that truck. And back then it almost looked like a hydraulic cylinder. It was a big floating piston cylinder that you put nitrogen in one side and the fluid went in the other side and the piston just floated in there. And it was kind of early days of accumulators, and it was a 1-pump, 3-dump setup. So you'd go around the corner and the truck would just start to lean like crazy. And I remember learning on that truck, I mounted all the hydraulics to like a wood panel that I upholstered in like vinyl, and then I bolted it down to the bed. And I couldn't get anything to work. So one of my old friends that kind of convinced me to go hydraulics came over. He's like, well, dude, your pump's not grounded. Like, none of this stuff's grounded. You're bolted to wood. How's any of this going to work? So that was kind of where I learned a lot. I mean, I learned to weld. I learned a little bit about suspension geometry. I learned about hydraulics big time, wiring, batteries, everything. I kind of learned a ton at that point. And I drove that truck to high school every day. So that was the first First one.
So you didn't have anybody teach you, you just kind of learned on your own?
Well, like I said, we worked on it in a buddy of mine's garage that was doing it as like a side gig. So he had a full-time job, but he would work on stuff for customers in his garage. And that's how I met him is I was going to just pay him to do it. But then I asked, just like any 16-year-old kid that is into the stuff, like, how do I figure out how to do this? So I asked him if I could help. And I told him I'd work for free or pay him because he was working on my truck. So I pay him to let me be there and help and teach me and learn. And, I learned a lot there. I actually turned that in a few years later to working for him in his garage as like my full-time job. So it was still his part-time job, but it turned into my full-time job working out of his garage for a little bit. Short-lived, but
Was that what led you to do your own thing, or did you kind of have other jobs in between there?
I kind of did a lot. That kind of, for me, that transitioned into like car stereos. And so I was working at Circuit City for a while back in those days doing car stereos. And then I was still like doing some fabrication stuff on the side. Ended up going to LoJack and working for LoJack, driving around a Chevy Astro van installing those LoJack anti-theft devices, or not even anti-theft devices, but like the recovery devices. So I was doing that for a while, but that gave me a ton of extra time. And at that point in my life, I was kind of getting into the off-road stuff because Arizona and California, the pre-runner and trophy truck and off-road type stuff scene is pretty big out here too. I mean, with Geyser Brothers and Fodrils and all those guys out here. So I was getting into that. A lot of the guys that I was friends with were into dirt bikes. And so I was more into the off-road stuff while I was working for LoJack. So I was building like a pre-runner in my garage at that time. So it turned in from like, I wanted to do something for myself and I had a guy that was willing to help me with that. Then I did it for a living for a little bit as a, 19-year-old kid, whatever. Went into working for like a real job, if you want to call it a real job, at Circuit City and then LoJack. And then when the LoJack thing fell apart, I had already owned a house. I think I was like 20 at this point. I bought my first house, and my
kids
mom
don't do that now at all.
No, my mom and my stepdad were real big on college, so I actually throw in all that. I did a year at NAU, which is in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Okay.
Didn't really feel it. Didn't really like anything about it. It was one of those first year things where you just take all the intro to this and intro to that classes, all the 100 classes. Didn't really find anything that stuck. So I came home. At that point, I started working for LoJack, and then I left LoJack to go back to school full time. So I went and got a degree in architecture.
That you use every day, I think.
I still, that's the crazy thing, and people give me crap all the time because I really am working like 3 jobs right now. So it's a lot sometimes, but I got a degree in architecture, and I was working for a guy which everything's come 180 degrees. It's crazy, or 360 degrees really, because I was working for a guy out in a neighborhood called Russell Ranch out here doing, semi-custom homes. So, and this was all before like 2008 when the market crashed. So we had a few people in the home office. I was kind of the number 1, I guess number 2. So number 1 after the owner. Everybody else kind of got pushed out because the market was crashing and we weren't doing as much work anymore. So as I was doing that, I was still working in my garage for fun. And somebody saw me working in the garage for fun and said, "Hey, can you do a car for me?" I'm going to sneeze now. That was kind of at the same time that the housing stuff was going down. I started doing more stuff. So a guy reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you do this for me?" That turned into another job for one of his buddies that turned into another job for him. And then that kind of started what is now Tray 5. So back then, I was doing like a car a week in my garage. And this was still like Street Source days, like 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And so I kind of got to be known. This was like when Hydraulics started, if you remember back then. So
I remember that, yeah.
I was installing stuff under like the Hydraulics name because those guys were buddies of mine back then. And it kind of got to be like, "Hey, you should put your own name to it." I'm like, "Well, just throw the Tray 5 name to it." So it was like a hydraulic installed by Tray 5, That's kind of where the Tray 5 as a fabricator, as a custom shop, as a whatever you want to call it, started. You have to go back and follow all those dates and see if I'm right with my timeline. It was the market crashed in 2008. Housing started slowing down. We weren't doing as many custom houses at that time. And my boss was like, "Yeah, if you find something else to do, do it." So I was staying home and working on cars in my garage rather than going to work. And then when he needed me, I'd come into work and I'd take a day off of working on cars. And then it got to the point where he slowed down so much that it was a waste of my time to go see him. So
Yeah.
I struggled and worked out of my garage. We ended up losing that house in the crash, rented a house for a little bit. I was still doing all right. So that's actually in the rental house that we bought after that, or that we rented after we lost that house, is where I built that black Mazda on tri-spokes that kind of got internet famous for a little bit. That was back like when Surface DVD was big. We did a video shoot with Surface DVD, and that truck kind of blew up because of that. Then my wife, during that time too, I was supporting her. She was going to school to be a teacher. So we moved out of that rental house and bought a house up in Northwest Peoria, where we are now, and lived there for a little bit. And then that's where I worked out of, like, as a real job, even though it wasn't like a legit business company name yet. It wasn't an incorporation yet. But that's where I kind of started, was in that house, 2010. So yeah, about 5 years, 6 years maybe, working out of the garage in that house. Maybe a year before that, kind of, if you consider the Mazda time.
That was your Mazda?
Yeah, my black Mazda, that was mine. Yeah. I sold it to a guy in Miami and then never saw it again. I think it popped up at like a dub show once and never saw it again. But anyway.
You mentioned the Circuit City stuff. That seems to be a common denominator, because people like Mike Alexander was there. That's where Chris at MTI got, his start and everything. So it seems that Circuit City was where a lot of the car guys got their foot in the door.
Yeah. I mean, and everybody that worked there, like in the audio department or the 12-volt department or whatever we called it back in the days, because we always had like the salesmen and then the installers, but everybody back then was a car guy. Like I remember one of the installers with me had it was a Nissan Sentra, and he imported an SR20 DET engine out of a Bluebird, I think they're called, in Japan. Imported this 2-liter turbo engine, and we engine swapped this thing like in the Circuit City install bay. Like stuff that we're not supposed to be doing. But maybe that's why everybody liked it there, because you could get away with a lot there as long as you were doing your job and making the company money. They kind of would turn the shoulder. I mean, shit, they sent me to Vegas to do a new store, and I'm 20-year-old kid with a fake ID in Vegas. We'd go out and party all night and then show up hungover as shit the next day and wire up an entire display and get all this stuff ready. And I don't know how I got put in that position, but it was just kind of like, it was fun to work at Circuit City back in the day if you were a car guy. So I understand why everybody used to be there.
I never did, but I had several friends that did during the heyday of it, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a long time ago, but it was fun.
So when did you decide that, all right, now I've outgrown the garage at the house, now I have to find me a new shop? What was the turning point for you?
The turning point is an easy answer. So there was 2 or 3 vehicles right in a row where I'm like, I just can't do this at home anymore. Like everybody used to know Adam at Big Time Threads. Kurt, when he had AutoCore, built him that white dually that ended up wrapping with the octopus down the side and everything like that. I don't know how many of your listeners will remember that truck, and Adam's still around. He's still got Big Time Threads. I don't really see him much anymore, but I know he's still around. But anyway, that truck was a 2007 or 8 dually, crew cab long bed dually that Kurt just went to town on. I think that truck went to SEMA and everything, but he drove it around for a little bit, and the front end needed some work. So he asked me if I could, work on the front end. It's like, well, sure, I guess I'm going to have to do this on the RV garage or the RV gate side of the house. So it's 115 degrees, and I've got a, $50 tent, basically. I won't call it an easy up because I couldn't afford an easy up, but tent basically over the front end of this truck, and I'm plasma cutting on the side of my house with an outlet that I rigged in to where my AC normally would plug in. So I'm unplugging my AC to plug in a welder to weld in 115 degree heat, and then plug in my AC back in so that the house stays cool. That was kind of a tipping point for me. Was like, all right, if I'm going to work on bigger stuff and I've got more people want me to do things, and I got to get a shop. One of the very first full builds, which this was crazy back, in 2008, 9, whatever it was, to build $100,000 vehicle. But I did, because it was just me back then, a Roadster Blazer. It was red, probably about the same time that Bob Grant was doing one that was primered for a while. I think ended up getting painted orange, and then I think it's still around. But built that, used a Porterbuilt, like he gave me like this much frame section with his drop member welded to it. And
Yeah.
then I built the rest of the frame myself, built that in the garage, did all the sheet metal work in my garage, leaned the windshield back, razored the windshield, all the sheet metal for, fitting 24s front and rear on a Blazer and capping the quarter panels and cutting the doors down so they meet the quarter panels, all that stuff. All that was done in my 3-car garage. The frame was built on a trench plate that I would roll around the garage with tubing underneath it so I could move it where I needed to. To think back on the crazy things that I did out of that garage is wild. But I think those were probably the 2 big things where I'm just like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. Because when I was working on that truck, I couldn't bring in my easy money. Back then, $1,000 a week to juice a car. Plus, I'd upsell for like hard lines and get an extra $300-400 for hard lines. So I was living in a house with my wife, no kids, making $1,400 a week. Plus, I had a little bit extra money from the big job, so I thought I was doing pretty well. But that's why I figured maybe I'll get a shop. So
now doing stuff like you did, you talking about all the mods you did to the Blazer. You just kind of taught yourself as you went.
I mean, I had done plenty of at that point. I'd done plenty of welding because if you talk about my first truck, I graduated high school in '97, so in '95 I was welding stuff together on that Isuzu. And then I was doing the off-road stuff. Cage. It's one thing to like bend tubes and stick them all in the truck and all that, but when I was building that off-road truck, I wanted it to be like a concealed cage. So I did some sheet metal work to fit that. You got to flash forward all the way to like 2008 when I was working on that. I'd done a ton of sheet metal work by then and ton of heavier fabrication and frame modification and that type of thing. To where I was able to build that chassis from scratch, other than the help of the Porterbuilt drop member, which that was nice because it gave me all the front end geometry. I was already probably self-taught at that point. Still a lot to learn at that point for sure, but I don't think there wasn't anything like groundbreaking that I did on that truck, to me anyway. The groundbreaking thing for me, like that was an LS1, and that was before everything was being LS swapped. And I remember the craziest thing on that truck, and to think back on it is wild. We did, like, remember the AVS LED strips? Like you get like 12-inch AVS LED strip. Put those in the skin. Like I put a Bob Grant combo, Ali combo, whatever, on the back, and the whole rear end was all welded up. And we put those AVS taillights in there, and we did whatever the front headlights were. I think there were still bulbs, but we couldn't get the blinkers to flash. And I had this dude, Ryan from California, that I knew, old Relaxed Atmosphere guy, come out and help me wire the LS and wire the truck. And obviously working at Circuit City and stuff, I knew my way around 12-volt stuff.
Yeah.
But we couldn't figure out how to get the blinkers to work. And remember, this is a long time ago compared to where we are now. We ended up wiring in taillight sockets and putting them in the center console and putting a bulb in there. And putting the bulb in there act as a resistor so that the turn signals would flash correctly. So in hindsight, all we had to do was put in the resistor, because that's all the LED, that's all the incandescent, bulb was, the 1157 typical taillight bulb, dual filament taillight bulb. But we put one of those in the center console and then jumped off of that back to the LED taillights, and everything worked great because it had the resistance. That's always stuck in my brain. Like, oh my God, I can't believe we put lights buried in a center console so that the taillights would flash. But then, it worked. It's probably still working. I've heard about that truck here and there. There's a guy that follows us on Instagram that I think lives down the street from that guy that we built it for, and he says it just sits in the garage. Drives it every once in a while. So that truck ended up going. That one ran in street trucks. I think Mulligan ran that one. It might have been Travis before Mulligan, but yeah, that one ran a long time ago.
So being you made the move from working at your house to doing a full shop, there's a lot of builders, a lot of people like listen to this that think, should I make that next step? What was the hardest part about going from your house to a shop?
Having faith in myself is the biggest thing. So, my dad was a big part of it. My uncle was a really big part of it. Because it's an expense, right? And it's one thing to like save up a couple bucks and, that's my dad pushed me to like come up with a business plan. Like, if you're going to make it a real business, make a business plan. So I made a business plan. My uncle at the same time was saying, hey, I'll help you out, make a business plan. So it's like, all right. So in making a business plan, you start to have a little bit more confidence in yourself, because you start looking at like, okay, I have this job plan and this job plan, and this one's coming in and that one's going to be a big one. And man, I probably have 6-7 months worth of work. Why am I not getting into a shop? So then I write up this whole business plan, give myself a 6-month thing and a 12-month thing and a 2-year thing. And I give this to my uncle. My dad helped me prepare this thing. I give it to my uncle. And my uncle says, all right, I'll throw you a couple bucks and try to help you get started. So he did that. I think we did $15,000, I think is what my uncle gave me, something like that. Moved in the shop, started going, and I kept saying, well, how do I pay you back? And how do I pay you back? And we got to a point where the shop was kind of running. I remember the day we moved in here, I brought in, it was a Chrysler 300 that I was doing hydraulics on. And then I had a guy here local hit me up about doing a Lincoln Continental, bagging a Lincoln Continental, like the typical suicide door one. And so those were the first two jobs in the shop. And at the same time, I met this dude Ralston that was minor leaguer for the Dodgers that came into town. He was injured, and they do rehab right up the street here. And he had an airbag fall out of his Tahoe on the transport when he was transporting it here for rehab. So I got to be buddies with him. And before we moved into the shop, when we moved into the shop, he was kind of like here because he's just rehabbing. So he had a lot of time. So he was hanging out, and he brought over one of the other players who is still a major leaguer playing for the Braves, I think now. He's a pitcher, but that's like somewhere here back behind me over there. You can't see in the screen, but I've got my first $20 bill, and I come from doing hydraulics in cars and laying out trucks in the garage and building full chassis for things that aren't supposed to have full chassis to my first $20 bill was like for putting on steel bumpers on a Jeep Wrangler for a major leaguer. So it was kind of that time, like, I'll just do whatever it takes, and any dollar I could make back then. It was a struggle, but it's just having confidence in yourself, and it's not easy. I mean, there was times where I was just living here at the shop. I was here and keep in mind too, I did this just over 10 years ago. My oldest is 11. So at the time I decided to make this plunge, we also welcomed in a kid to the world. I had a lot going on, and it was just hustle, just be here as much as I can, get as much work as I can done. And it wasn't 4 or 5 months I put up a help wanted thing because I'm just like, you know what, I'm not gonna be able to do it myself. So I put up that help wanted thing, and that's when Hector came in. And Hector came from like what enticed me about him is he was a really good TIG welder. And I've got a buddy of mine that is still a friend of mine, but he was like my TIG welder guy. So like when I needed to weld suspension parts or something, I would tack them together or put them in a fixture, and I'd bring them over to Benny, and Benny would TIG weld them for me back before I could hold a TIG welder. So what enticed me about Hector, and for those that don't know, we call him Pio. So if I go back and forth between Hector and Pio, it's the same person. But so he worked at Ron Davis, TIG welding aluminum radiators all day. He worked for another guy in his garage, TIG welding stuff. And that's kind of where he learned a little bit of the hot rod type world that he knew. But he also worked for like a turbo manufacturing company, not manufacturing the turbos, but manufacturing the system. So TIG welding, stainless, and all that type of thing. So didn't know a ton about building vehicles, but had something like I knew a ton about building vehicles at that point, but I wasn't the best TIG welder and that type of thing. So that's where him and I came together, and it really worked out. So he's, like I said, he's been over here 10 years. Wouldn't be here without him. And that's why I really hate that self-made thing too, because like, I feel like when I was doing it by myself, I would have just still been in the garage, but it's like taking that plunge and relying on people, relying on my uncle for a little bit of cash, relying on my dad for a lot of advice, business and banking and that type of thing. And then surrounding yourself with the right guys. There's no such thing as self-made. It's surround yourself with the right people. There's got to be a leader, right? And I like to think that I can lead these guys, but I'm nothing without them. So
how much are you hands-on in the shop now?
Not much, to be honest with you. I mean, I wish I was out there more sometimes. Definitely not in the summer. I mean, I'm hands-on. No, we still don't have AC. I can't. That's the biggest problem with out here is the west side of town. There's just not a lot of. That's what the east side has going for it in Phoenix. The east side of town has a lot of 5 to 25,000 square foot buildings that you can get into real easy. The west side, we don't have a ton of options. So Frank and I have actively been looking for somewhere to go for probably, at least 5 years. We've been looking for somewhere to go. Just can't find anything. And I'm not going to put the money into a rental shop. I'm not going to spend the money on an AC. But so yeah, we're still here and still no AC. But the last truck that I worked on, like with my hands and not just my eyes, is the red truck that we just posted up that will probably debut at LST. It's almost ready. I mean, if we wanted to kill ourselves, maybe we could have it at Dino's, but I don't want to kill the guys, and I don't want to ask a lot of my interior guy. And I feel like we've been down that road 100 times. I don't need to do it. It's not going to SEMA, nothing like that. So we'll probably debut it at LST. But I did wire that truck just because at the same time we had another one to wire. So I took it on myself to wire one of them. But as far as like a welder goes, I probably haven't picked up a welder in I don't know, 6 months, something like that. And it's not very often that I do anymore.
So you just go through and basically put the package together and say, this is what we need. This is how we need to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the customer end of things now. So, and I always was, I guess, to a point, but now it's just relaying what the customer wants to the guys in the shop. And what's the direction? Where are we going? What are the options? What color? I mean, down to, I guess that was a big deal, but it's an easier deal. It's like, what color are we painting this thing? What wheels are we doing? What size brakes do you want to do? And it's a lot of just figuring out all the parts that are going to go on it, getting to that stage where we have everything here. So all the parts ordering and all the, like how long is this chassis going to take to get, or where are these wheels, or how long do they take to make, and when should we order those, and getting all that stuff done and organized. I mean, we juggle about 20 vehicles at a time.
Oh, wow.
They're not all in the shop at one time. Like, I'm looking up because my TV is right above my computer where all the cameras are. So we have like, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have about 10 in the shop right now. Frank has 1, 2, 3, 4. Frank has about 4 of ours over there next door. We've got 1 at tuning, and so that makes 15. And so there's about 5 or so, maybe a little bit more right now, actually, that we're actively like stocking parts for. So chassis on order, engines on order, wheels on order, that type of stuff. And we like to do that before we bring the vehicle in, which is kind of like everybody asks us, how long's your wait? How long's your wait list? What do you got? When can I get on the list? And that's just start ordering parts. I mean, some of these, like a chassis, can take a year to get sometimes. So if we order a chassis right now, we'll probably be able to get started on it in a year, just because we juggle so much that it's not like I have to stay on one vehicle for that entire year. I can juggle some stuff around. Like the Suburban that we have in here right now came in super early, wasn't even planning on taking the job, but it's like, we can get in here, get a little bit done. Chassis was done and he didn't have a builder, so let's bring it in, let's get it done. So
what is your current weight if someone wants to go on your list?
It's like I say, it's probably about a year right now is where we try to keep it. We do have a lot coming in, so that may grow here pretty soon. We're waiting on I think we're still waiting on about 5 chassis to come in, and maybe 6. And I can't I don't think that what we have in the shop right now will get all the way to there. So the easy thing is to say a year, because I can usually get it within somewhere similar to that range. I mean, I can tell you 2 years, and I'd probably just be fine with the work that's here. But if I tell you a year, then you don't lose interest waiting, and we can still get some work done on it. It makes it to where the vehicle's here a little bit longer. But between Frank and I, we do a pretty good job at scheduling around each other. Frank kind of relies on me for scheduling a lot, because what I'll do is he'll come over and say, hey, where are you with this truck? And he'll come over and he'll do that constantly. So that way he knows what his schedule needs to be with the truck when he takes it. So a year's fine.
Now, you mentioned earlier one of the first big builds you did, like $100,000 build. We all know that's in this world that $100,000 build is nothing now. When did you see that growth from it being, just, it's $100,000, that's over the top build, to now you've got 7-figure builds coming out?
I'll give you the same excuse that everybody gives everybody. It's COVID. I mean, for some reason, COVID doubled the price of everything. I mean, we were definitely like, our hourly rate when we moved into the shop, I think it was like $50 an hour. And then we moved it to 75, and then we moved it up, and then we moved it up, and then we moved it up. And we just had to keep moving it up, because like our rent, I paid double per square foot from when I moved in here 10 years ago. So that's just rent. I mean, then all the internet bills and the power bills and everything that comes along with that, everything's gone up. So when everything goes up, and like the employees, they all need more money because their rent at home's gone up, or their mortgage has gone up, or their car payment's gone up. I mean, we buy $90,000 diesels now. Like just a normal diesel that you haul a trailer with is now $100,000. So they used to be 50. It's the same thing with the cars and trucks. $100,000 used to be expensive to build something from scratch, and now, I mean, we can't even do like a patina build that we're not painting for $100,000. I mean, I think the last one we did was almost $200,000 for a patina job.
So I'm right there in the same boat with what I'm doing with the Blazer. I mean, I have a lot of companies backing me with parts, but it's like you look at the breakdown of what it should cost, and it's like mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to tell anybody because I think when people hide their costs, it's a little shady.
Yeah,
When somebody's like, "Hey, how much does that truck cost?" "Oh, I don't know. If you're serious, you can email me." It's like, why? It's okay. I'm going to email you and ask you how much it costs, but maybe they're just tire kickers. They don't want to waste your time. But I mean, you're a painted vehicle. I've got no problem telling you is not leaving here for under 300 grand. It's just that's where we've gotten to, and we could spend more. I mean, you could do $100,000 engine and transmission combo right now.
yep.
So how do you expect to build a vehicle for 100 grand? I mean, our go-to engine for like a standard, nothing crazy horsepower, is going to be like an LS3, 525 or 550 horsepower LS3. And that engine's over 10 grand. Just the engine. You still need pulley setup. You still need electronics. You still need transmission, torque converter. You still need headers, exhaust, everything. So how do you expect to build a truck for 100 grand anymore? It's just not possible.
It's a lot of the people that's not done that it takes people like you mentioning that to them to realize, oh, well, it's not a $3,000 paint job anymore. It's not a $5,000 engine and transmission install. I think the disconnect between what actual value is versus what people remember it being is kind of where that's at.
Yeah. I mean, it's across the board too, right? I mean, Frank used to be able to paint a truck for 20 grand, and now Frank's not painting anything. A full paint job, which is not a paint job, right? It's a full restoration. It's painting the engine and transmission. It's bed lining underneath the cab and bed lining inside the cab and color matching bed liner and everything inside the bed, underneath the bed, outside, everywhere, the inside of the truck, everything. It's not just a paint job, but you're not getting out of Frank's shop for less than 100 grand. I mean, maybe here and there, but an average probably 100 grand to get a paint job, and they used to be done for 20. I mean, it just goes across the board like that. It's everything's gone up in value, and hourly wages have gone up in value. So our hourly rate's gone up, paint's gone up, wheels have gone up, everything goes up. So the shops.
I love the keyboard warriors are like, there's no way that you'd have more than $10,000 in that paint job, and it's like, okay, well, show me where you can get this quality for $10,000.
You can't buy the primer for that anymore. I mean, Frank's more of an expert on the cost of that stuff, but I mean, I hear him talk about clear coat and how much a gallon of clear coat is now. It's just crazy. Like I remember buying Bondo at like AutoZone for $10 a gallon, or then you figured out that the Bondo brand is junk. So then you go to like a Sherwin-Williams or some kind of paint store and you buy like the Rage Gold, go back to 2006, 7. That's what we're doing. We're going Rage Gold from Sherwin-Williams, and that stuff was like $20 a gallon. No, that's gone. It's no longer there. It's a lot more expensive these days, and it's that way. Like I said, across the board. I don't know. I mean, I think
you've had your hands in several. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go.
You've had your hands in several SEMA builds over the years. Do you remember what your first one was?
My first personal one, which being known for Chevy C10s is funny, but my first personal truck was a 97 F-150. And that was with, who did I take? I don't remember. I remember it was right outside when they did the Ford out front. And it was right behind the Ford trailer. So it worked out really good for whatever company I went with back then. It was good for Ford because it was a Ford and it was right in front of the Ford trailer. It was right by Ford out front. So it all worked really well. But that was my first personal vehicle. I probably already had, I think there was one year where I had my hand in like 8 vehicles that were at SEMA. And they weren't full builds by any means, but I think that was the year prior to that. I had like 7 or 8 vehicles there. One of them was old Big Time Adams dually was there again after I'd redone the front suspension on it. But stuff like that I just had my hands in. I don't remember what the first one that I had my hands in was, but I mean, I've had juiced cars there. I've had juiced trucks there. I've had lifted vehicles there, several lifted vehicles there, which a lot of people don't think of us as a lifted truck guy, but I've had several lifted ones there. But I've had our token C10 there 100 times now. I mean, I can't tell you how many vehicles we've had at SEMA, but I've been going to SEMA since I was like 18, I think. Not really.
Now you said this year you're not really involved much with SEMA. I guess just the chassis.
Well, I decided to take a year off. SEMA is always a good time. I'm getting older. I can't party as much as I used to. It's expensive for us as a company because I'm one of those guys where if if I'm going to go, or if two of us are going to go, then we're all going to go. And if I'm going to stay at a nice hotel, we're all going to stay at a nice hotel. Like, I like to treat my guys the way that I would want to be treated. So if I'm going to go and stay at the Cosmo,
you don't circus.
Yeah, it's, well, funny you say that. When I brought that F-150, that's where I stayed, was Circus, because I didn't have any money. You know, like, we were broke. It was nothing. There was nothing going on back then. It was kind of like I had an opportunity, so I just paid the $30 a night or whatever it was back then and stayed for the whole week. But like 2 years ago, I wanted to stay at Cosmo. I was tired. We used to stay at Flamingo, like, religiously. And Flamingo it's still fun to party over there and hang out there. And they've got a lot of cool things on that little promenade street. But it smells. I don't smoke. It smells like smoke. And so I wanted to try something nice. So we went to Cosmo. And I'm not going to leave my guys at the Flamingo and then go stay at Cosmo. But
yeah,
I kind of did the math on it last year. And with closing down the shop for a week, because all the guys go, and I pay for everything for all the guys. So I put them up in the hotel. They're instructed to basically not use their personal money for anything. So food for breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks. I don't care if it's a Mountain Dew or a Tito's and soda, put it on the company card. So I just like to treat the guys like that, because if we're going to kill ourselves to go to SEMA and try to make a name for ourselves or keep a name for ourselves at SEMA, then I want them to, enjoy the fruits of their labor. I make sure that everything's paid for. But it comes to a point where I was just like, is it worth it? I don't know if it's worth it. Is it worth spending $50,000+ for everybody to go and shut the shop down for a week and lose all those hours of income, plus have all the outgoing money from drinks and food and beverage and whatever it may be. Yeah. So I decided to take a year off. And it's funny that I decided to take this year off, because this was the year I probably had more companies reach out to me about bringing something for their booth than ever before. I mean, usually it's like, working with precision replacement products the last few years and having a vehicle in their booth was great, because they just called me and say, hey, what can we put in our booth? It's like, what do you got that we can do? And so it's worked out a few years with them. So I've been with them for a few years, and I could tell Derek was a little bit like, no, that kind of sucks. Like, we don't have I feel like we were reliable. Everybody, we've never missed SEMA. We've never missed a deadline. We've never had to push a vehicle in because we couldn't get it running. We've never had to do any of that stuff. So we were very reliable, I feel like, when it comes to SEMA. I could kind of feel a little disappointment from him that he didn't have us to rely on. But we had calls from quite a few companies saying, hey, can we get something of yours for our booth? And I turned them all down. I just said, we're going to take a year off. And everybody seemed to understand. Like, SEMA is a great thing, but it's also something where if you tell people you're not going to do it, they totally get it. So I don't want to bag on SEMA, because I think I do. They do a lot for our industry, and I'm grateful for that for sure. But they are hungry for money sometimes, and you can tell. But I wanted to take a year off and see what it did. And Prismatic reached out and said, do you have anything we can do? Like, they saw the chassis from Rev B that we did for it's a Patina 59 Chevy that we're doing right now. It's done. It's going to tuning next week. But I told him, I said, no way, that truck will be done way before SEMA. My customer's not going to want to leave that chassis as it is for the next 4 or 5 months and not finish the truck. So they said, do you have anything else? I said, no, I'm not really doing SEMA this year. I'm done with it. And they said, well, we're just looking for a chassis like that. So it doesn't have to be a running driving vehicle, no interior, no nothing. So as anybody that follows me knows, Scott and I have a really good relationship together, going back from when he was at GSI, now obviously with Rev B. I reached out to Scott. I said, hey, we've got a couple customers with Rev B chassis that we could probably get ready for SEMA, and Prismatic Powders, who is Cerakote as well, wants to have some of our work in their booth at SEMA. Basically, would you haul up the truck and push it in and do all the work that I don't want to do and take a week off and do everything that I don't want to do with SEMA to see how it goes? Well, you will do it, and we'll take care of getting the chassis ready for you. So Scott said, whatever it takes. They're a newer company, so the more exposure they can get, the better. So we're actually done with that chassis. Hector's coming in today to grab it, to take it over to Rev B so they can do some photo shoot stuff with it, and then it'll go up to SEMA here. Yeah.
I know when I had Scott on, he'd mentioned that he had the chassis going in the booth, and watching you guys put it together, the amount of Cerakote involved with every nut and bolt and washer. Like, I thought I was doing a lot of Cerakote stuff on mine and powder, and I'm like, y'all's rack that Frank had with everything hanging on it, like, no, that don't even look fun.
I don't even know how many racks there were, but that first one was pretty funny, because it's like, Frank and I always, like I said, we've got good scheduling between ourselves. So he's like, what do you need first? And it's like, well, chassis at powder coat, so I need all the parts to put the chassis back together. So it's like, yeah, when Prismatic said that, we'd like to see all the hardware Cerakoted, it's like, all right, not a big deal for me. Have fun Cerakoting, Frank. And Frank's never Cerakoted anything before, so that was his first time. And for those of you that don't know, like we didn't know, Cerakote's very easy.
Yeah.
Sandblast the nuts and bolts and spray the Cerakote on there. That's it. Like that's the prep. The prep is sandblast, and then obviously spend the time hanging them. But
yeah,
and we had to kind of work through it with how he's going to hang things so that like I don't. It's funny. I was just talking to Kevin about up at Kindig about chroming hardware and how I don't like chroming hardware because I feel like you can't chrome the end of the threads and the end of the threads rust. So how do you we were just having a conversation about like how do you keep those threads from rusting and what do you do? And with the Cerakote, you just coat the whole thing, right? It doesn't matter. It's almost like a zinc plating on a normal bolt, whether it's gold zinc on a grade 8 or clear zinc on a grade 5. It's the same thickness. So you can coat the whole thing, but he was wrapping it up on the end of the threads. So where it was wrapping was going to be the end of the threads. If it doesn't get coated, then it rusts. So I had to like make sure that we were wrapping the wire around the shank of the bolt or closer to the head side of the threads rather than the exposed side of the head. So that, or the exposed side of the bolt. So that way we don't get any rust issues. So little learning curve there on like how to hang stuff, how to make sure that everything gets coverage, especially when you're spraying a couple hundred bolts and washers and nuts at the same time. But the beautiful thing is there was no taping. It was just like it was clear zinc or gold zinc. And I tried to show that on one of my YouTube videos. I think I did it on one of his YouTube videos for him. Just took a nut and a bolt, threaded them together like it's nothing. A lot of work, but it did get simplified once he figured it out. I think he was regretful for saying that he wanted to do it at first, but I think now he's grateful because he's already like done some Cerakote on his truck. And, we just did some bed strips for that 59 Chevy. So now I think the Cerakote will be more of a part of our daily lives over here than it used to be. Where it used to just be like I'd have Pat Coast Powder, who does all of our powder coating. I'd have them do it for us. So, now Frank can do it next door.
Well, they body work all the stuff before powder, right?
Not everything. We've had them do body work on a few things, like those Broncos that we've done that a lot of people don't know us for, but we've done quite a few Broncos, and the Bronco guys want stock frames because the VIN number is on them, but the stock frames rust. So we'll do rust repair metal-wise on the frames and then send them out to powder coat, and they'll body work like where we've done the rust repair, and they'll smooth out the pitting in the frame so the frame looks brand new when they powder coat it. My orange truck, I had them do body work on so that it was smooth because we did like they called it tray black because it was triple coated black. But just so that was like a mirror, and you'll see them, if anybody follows Pat Coast Powder, you'll see them do that on like the Kindig stuff. And they'll actually, I've never had them do this for me, but on some of the Kindig stuff, they'll have them body work the welds and everything. So, because they use some like Art Morrison chassis and the Roadster Shop chassis that aren't like the spec chassis. So like their Fast Tracks or the Revos that get welded and ground down, they use a gnarly grit when Roadster Shop sands those chassis down, like a 36 grit or something.
Oh, wow.
So they have to body work them to fill in all the sand scratches. They've done some of that stuff for us, but we've never had them body work the welds. And just because, the Rev B stuff everybody asks about, is that thing welded by a machine? And it's fun to go down there and see them. They're just welding by hand. And so we kind of want to show off that quality. It looks nice to grind down a chassis too and body work it all. It looks great. Everybody's got different styles. I kind of like showing off the workmanship and the craftsmanship that's involved in making some of that stuff. So never body worked out any of the welds, but we've definitely smoothed out rails and that type of thing.
If you could pick out one or two vehicles that you've built that would make you feel this is my pinnacle, this is one of my favorites, what would those vehicles be?
The next one. It's always the next one. Like if we can't do better on the next one than we did the last one. So my favorite one's always the last one, and the one that I think is the best one's always the next one. I don't know if that sounds cliche or
that's one way to
or
put
whatever,
it.
but I always try to improve. Like we're always looking to try to do something else, and especially with like the C10s. I feel like we've done so many. It's like, well, what do we do different on the next one? So we've got one that we're finishing up right now, the red one I was talking about earlier. That thing's probably one of the nicest ones we've ever done. But then it's like, well, how do you say that's nicer than Manny's blue and white one? Because Manny's blue and white one is one of the nicest ones we've ever done. The nice thing is they're a little bit different, whereas Manny wanted all the trim and all the emblems, and I mean the chrome around the big back window that they never did, or maybe I think that's vice versa. That truck had a small back window. They never did the chrome trim around the small back window. So taking the big back window trim and cutting it down and reshaping the corners to fit the small window. Like that's how trimmed out he wanted that truck. Whereas this red one, there's no trim.
Yeah.
There's no emblems. There's no keyholes. It's got a roll pan on it. It's a little bit more modern. But now that one's my favorite. But it's like they can both be my favorite because they're a little bit different, even though they're both 67 to 72 C10s. But now we've got one in the shop right now. I just posted the front end of it, but we're doing a welded up tailgate in the back. So kind of bringing back some of the mini truck days, but doing them in more classy ways. We've got a skin that we got from Bob Grant, and it's like his old school. They used to call them like Cali combos, but we've done a lot of work to it to strengthen the bottom of it because it's got a big opening in it. We'll build exhaust tips that fit the opening that he put in it. We'll mount the license plate. We'll put mesh in it. We'll make it kind of more of that truck has like a Ferrari-ish look to it is kind of what we're going with it. So we did that dual plenum Edelbrock intake on the LS, but we'll do like a textured powder coat on it. So it kind of looks like a Ferrari engine almost, when you see the red Ferrari dual plenum intakes. But we did the same thing on the front end, the rear end. So it's got the same similar opening, but it's a roll pan, no bumpers, no keyholes, no emblems, no wipers, no antenna. So it's like, well, maybe now that one will be my favorite because it's just a little bit different. But I don't know. Sometimes it's customers too. Like some customers are more fun to work for. So
yeah.
Like I remember I guess beating around the bush and going back to your original question, one of my favorite builds that we have done, just because it was a little bit different, and I got to enjoy being friends with Brandon, is we got to do his Suburban, 64 Suburban. It's actually for sale right now if anybody wants it. But we built that Suburban a long time ago, and that was the second vehicle that we had done for him. First vehicle was his grandfather's truck that he brought. His grandfather bought brand new. That was that white 48 long bed that everybody asked if it was a long bed because it had so much done to it that you couldn't really tell. But then we did his Suburban, which his dad owned from very early on. So that one's cool because he still drives it. He originally lived here, moved out to Oklahoma, but he goes to the Cars and Coffees and it puts his
Which
kids
one is
in
it?
it. It's kind of it's an interesting color, which is what I really liked about it too. So it's 64 Suburban. It's only 64 Suburban we've ever done. 64 to 66, but it's like a grayish color, but it's also like a brownish color. So it's an old GM color. The way that it hits in the light's pretty cool. That's why I liked that color so much. It's not bright in your face, but it's not boring either. Not like a black or a silver or something. I mean, it's just kind of a unique color. But I mean, he's the guy that when we were building that would live in town. So he'd pop in on a Thursday with some beers or with some adult cocktails or something, and we'd sit here and shoot the shit for a little bit. So it was cool building it for him because he came by all the time and would check on it. He was always pumped up about it. He was always talking about how we have to have a back seat in it for his kids, and we kind of watch his kids grow up a little bit. And now he's out in Oklahoma, and we still see him driving it. So it's like that's probably one of my more memorable builds, just because of that relationship that Brandon and I had during the build, and even still now. I mean, but I've met so many good people. Like it's hard to. Just like the trucks, I've built so many nice trucks in my brain that it's hard to narrow down one. I've had so many nice customers that it's, most of these guys will turn into friends too. Because think about it, these things take a year or two to build. Some customers we never meet, like they don't even come out here, or maybe they come out for an open house and see it under construction, or we see them at a show or something. But, the guys that pop in, and see and hang out for a little bit or go to lunch with us on a Thursday or, those are the fun ones too.
So if you fast forward, say 5 years from now, what do you see Tray 5 being or growing to? What is your goal? I know you already mentioned trying to find a bigger place.
Yeah, other than that's probably my biggest goal is to buy a building. I feel like we do well enough that we can afford to do a building, and then I would not mind putting some money into it because these guys work hard in the summertime, and we have coolers in the roof, and we have coolers that we roll around, and we have fans, and we kind of do as much as I can for them to keep them cool. But I also don't want to dump $30,000-$40,000 or whatever it would be to cool this place with air conditioning. To insulate it, not just putting the ACs in there, but it makes no sense to put ACs if the place isn't insulated. So insulating it and getting better doors, it's not my building. So I don't want to dump that kind of money into a building that's not mine. So definitely a goal would be in the next 5 years, hopefully sooner than later, is to get into our own building that I can own and get these guys a little bit more comfort. Other than that, I've seen so many of these shops grow, and you see some of the growing pains from it. I'm comfortable with where we are. I mean, to be clear, I guess, our numbers grow every year, but our team doesn't. We keep the same amount of guys here, but I think we're turning out a little bit more work. We're a little bit more efficient. Customer base grows because the more efficient we get with doing stuff, the shorter build time is, so we can bring in extras. So I have one guy that I'd like to employ here at some point, and I think we have room for him. And other than that, I don't see myself wanting to have 30 employees or even 10 employees. I think we have such a tight-knit team here, I think, is the biggest thing for me. Is everybody that works here gets along. We all know each other's wives. We all know each other's, well, only Hector and I have kids. Chris has an older son but doesn't live here in the state, so we've never met him. But all of our wives get along. Our kids like to hang out. I take the guys down to Mexico once a year. Families and husbands and wives and everybody goes to Mexico, and we rent a couple units at a resort down at Rocky Point, and we all go to the pool together. I like the idea of being able to do that rather than being able to say, oh, we've got a 100,000 square foot shop and 40 employees, and we do this, we do that.
Then it turns to here's your pizza party.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We go to lunch every Thursday here. Every Thursday I take the guys to lunch, and it's like a ritual, and we don't miss it. If I can't be here for some reason on Thursday, then Hector takes everybody to lunch. It still happens. That's the way I like it. That's the team size that I like.
I know we touched on the. I know we discussed on how the price of everything's changed. How have you seen the modifications you've had to do 10 years ago versus now change? Technology played a role in that.
So that's a funny one too, because I've been in the car club scene for a long time, and the guys that moved in on the other side of us. So Frank is literally behind that wall. If you go that way, the next suite over is a guy named Eric and a guy named Danny they're old Severed Ties guys. And Eric used to be a part, and I don't know how long you've been around, but Eric used to be a part of Mod Shop. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Eric Boyles, who used to be, it was him and Mason Rush. Mason Rush is still painting. But long story shorter, Eric and Danny moved in next door, and they're doing custom cabinetry. And so Eric and I were talking the other day, and he said, man, this must be so much nicer than how it was 10 years ago, huh? And I'm like, it's not bad. There's new challenges, but 10 years ago, like I said, go back even further than that. I built that blazer frame in my garage on a trench plate. It's because that's all that was a bent up 4-wheel drive frame. So I could have bolted the Porterbuilt cross member up to that frame and used it, but it was bent and tweaked, and so it was easier just to make a frame for it. Nobody was making frames back then, production wise. So I think the biggest change nowadays is the heavy fabrication. And the guys today don't have to have knowledge of geometry. They don't have to know what camber and caster and all that stuff is, and Ackerman and instant center and all those things that I had to know back in the day, setting up 4-links and setting up suspensions. What's going to happen if you run your 4-link bars backwards? People used to do that. And it's just that thing's got to drive like crap. How do you put 4-link bars backwards? It's so wrong. But people were just doing it, and it was getting them down the road. It's like when we put 5-inch blocks and air shocks on a monoleaf spring. It wasn't right, but it worked. So the biggest change I would say from 10 years ago to today is we have the companies like Rev B. They're 30 minutes away from me. I can drive over there and pick up a chassis, and I can bolt that chassis right underneath a C10 or a Suburban or an Advanced Design or a Apache or whatever truck behind us. That truck in the picture behind us, or in this view behind us, that truck behind us is 100% brand new. There's not a used part on that truck. You couldn't do that 10 years ago. Nobody was making cabs like Premier Street Rods or half of the other companies out there. I mentioned Rev B, but that's because I've got a good relationship with them. But the reality is there's 10 chassis companies at least.
Yeah, go to dealers, they're all stacked beside each other.
Yeah, and there's other companies making brand new sheet metal for everything. For 47 to 53, all the way to, I think they started on square bodies now. So from 1947 to 1987, you can build a truck brand new chassis, brand new cab, brand new bed, brand new, obviously, wheels, tires, brakes, all that. You can build them brand new. You could not do that 10 years ago. So maybe one day the Lincolns will catch on and we'll start making reproduction panels for Lincolns. So I just had a guy hit me up about doing a Lincoln Continental, and he was asking about budget. I said, whatever else you were thinking about, double the budget. You've got to buy used parts or make your own parts to do a Lincoln. So it's, all these Chevys, you just go buy it. Go buy a fender. It doesn't fit great. Fits good, not great. Still gonna have a ton of time making it fit right, but that's the biggest difference. Is 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago you weren't buying a chassis and you weren't buying a cab. So I'd say that's probably the biggest difference for me. Anyway.
Well, where do people find you online to keep up with what you're doing?
We're trying to push the YouTube thing. That's kind of where we try it. So Brian Good, who you've mentioned a few times over at Grindr, him and I have known each other forever. He actually came to my very first suite, the one over there, when I moved into here, before I moved anything in here. So over 10 years ago, he came down and filmed, and we never did anything with that film. And we've talked about it a couple times. Like, man, it'd be so cool that when I move out of here, we can do a slideshow reel of everything that happened here in the 10 to however many more years I'm stuck here, starting from literally day one.
Yeah.
But anyway, I lost my train of thought with Brian, but the YouTube thing. So he comes down, we try to film 2 videos a month, and it's basically just me going around the shop, telling everybody what we're doing while the guys are still working. He gets some B-roll of them working, but it's like this. I just ramble, tell you what's going on. And so far we've gotten some really good feedback and it's growing. Since we've started doing that, I've stopped posting on Instagram as much, but Instagram probably still has the most action right now. So if you need to see us, Instagram is where it's at. But when you're on Instagram, I'm just going to tell you to go look at YouTube. So if you go subscribe to our YouTube, you get a more in-depth look of everything around here with the YouTube videos. And then every time we finish one, we'll do a wrap-up video. So we've got Aaron's truck coming up. We still haven't done a wrap-up video on my dually. We'll wrap up Larry's truck. We'll have 5 or 6 wrap-ups in a row. We did it last year. For some reason, between October and March is when we finish everything. So that's kind of the biggest thing for me right now. If you want to find out what we're doing, go check out our YouTube channel.
That's something. It's always in my rotation in the garage when I'm working on stuff. So
that's what we like, man. It's I didn't expect it to go anywhere. Like you've mentioned, Dino's. We've got Dino's coming up in. Our open house is November 13th, so today's the 24th, so a little over 2 weeks from now. Or I guess that would be three weeks from now, something like that. You looking at the calendar?
This will actually drop after Dino. So if you're listening to this now, then that means you missed the open house.
Yeah,
so
you missed the open house. It was a really good time.
It
was a great time. We had 2,000 people here. We gave away a bunch of free pizza. But speaking of Dino's and the open house, it sucks because it's come out afterwards. But for next year, we have about 1,500 to 2,000 people that come here through the open house. So that's gotten overwhelming for sure. And now we've got guys that help us out, like Bear Breaks helps us out with the pizzas, and Sherwin-Williams helps us out. Or not Sherwin. Bear Breaks helps us out with the pizza, and then PPG, Frank gets to help us out with all the drinks and everything. So we basically set a cooler or several coolers of waters and sodas and whatever out front, and we have, I think we had 150 or 200 pizzas delivered last year.
Wow.
So it's a big deal. Dino's is a big deal for us, but we don't do a ton of shows. We're going to try to. That's the other thing about pulling out of SEMA this year is we're going to try to do more good guys shows. I never did them before because it was weekend at SEMA, all week at SEMA, weekend at SEMA, come home, Thursday open house, Friday, Saturday at Dino's, and then the very next weekend is good guys. It's I'm so burnt out by then. So that's why we're going to try the good guys thing because we can sell shirts and hats and tailgate kits and all of our stuff that we sell on the website. We can sell at good guys, so we can try to recoup some of our money from being there. So we'll try that this year. That's the plan. We'll see how it works out.
Well, cool. I appreciate you coming on, man. It was good to finally catch up. I remember I first met you a couple years ago at LST. So
when you were working for that one company?
Yeah, back then.
Yeah, back then. That company that we won't talk about.
But I appreciate you coming on, man. It's definitely fun to watch some of the stuff you build. It's given me some inspiration on some of the stuff that I was doing on the Blazer this year because the stuff you do is just completely over the top. So if I can take a little bit of what you do and kind of throw into what I'm doing, that definitely gives me inspiration. I'm sure it does a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes the same way, right? Like we still take inspiration from other people too. I mean, there's so many guys that we can look at and go, man, that's a cool idea. I wish we would have thought of that or whatever. But yeah, we'll see you at SEMA. I'm going to be up there. Still gotta kiss babies and rub elbows or whatever they say. But I'll be up there. So like I said, that chassis is going in Prismatic Powders booth in Central Hall. Where's your Blazers going?
TIS wheels.
Okay, so it's South Hall, or is that
No,
Central?
and out in front of South Hall, over
Okay.
by the Renaissance. The old Dub area is what I say.
I know where it is. Yeah, so we'll still be there. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Sorry it took me so long to coordinate schedules, but like I said,
Busy man.
3 jobs right now is basically my life. So I'm juggling a lot. So
I appreciate it, man.
all right, we'll talk to you later.